The story of how PUBG Mobile continues to evolve is fascinating. After an infamous explosion of popularity in China, where the game was not officially available, and it was facing the possibility of being banned, the Chinese giant Tencent, which is now said to become the second biggest owner of Bluehole, announced the ambitious plan of porting what was at the time a notoriously heavy PC game to mobile, of all places. They announced two versions, Exhilarating Battlefield, a more direct version of the PUBG we know, and Army Attack, which apparently is more arcade style, has action taking place on warships, which I have never heard about this until now. An Exhilarating Battlefield eventually released in the rest of the world as PUBG Mobile. While the complexity of mobile games have been increasing over the last few years, the idea of an almost PC-level Unreal Engine 4 game running on a phone was received with some skepticism at the time, until Tencent delivered this, making it the only official free-to-play PUBG option, which I'm pretty sure helped its success. What concerned me at the moment, and has continued concerning me with my coverage of this game, is how accessible the game will be to those with cheaper or older phones in their pockets, especially given the prices of flagship devices these days and the fact that most material that you find online regarding this game is tested on those phones. And then there is talk of yet another version of this game made at budget phones. I'm getting ahead of myself. Today I plan to take a deeper look at the performance of this game on older phones and how it changes between generations. I have been interested in how mobile gaming has been changing for a while, but I had not quite figured out how to get more accurate performance readings on Androids, but now I think I kinda have it, so let's take a look. Before trying some of the most extreme options, I want a control group of sorts. Shopping for a phone is a daunting task nowadays with literally hundreds of options. After a unfortunate incident with my last phone, I was on the market for a new one and holy shit, phones are getting expensive. Wait, an iPhone is how much right now? Are you serious? So given that my budget was less, I opted for this absolutely beautiful piece of technology. This is a $200 Xiaomi Redmi Note 5, equipped with a Snapdragon 625 and 4GB of RAM. How the heck does this thing have more RAM than some of my PCs? Given the price range and the high resolution of the screen, I was concerned about PUBG not working on it, but nope. On the lowest settings, it was so smooth I could not even process it. The profiler was showing 60 FPS most of the time, with brief drops to 30 or 50. This $200 phone runs PUBG better than my PC. This is gonna be hard to process. What is happening? Why are people still buying these? The game does make a good ample use of the ridiculous amount of RAM modern phones are starting to chip with. In order to get some better stats on the app, I used the MEM info tool and the top tool from the Android debug bridge. And the whole game seemed to use about 800 megabytes of total memory on the lowest settings, which is pretty big for a mobile game, but impressive on a game of these dimensions. And the CPU is not far behind, with often close to 200% use, sometimes a bit more. Percentages over 100 on the top command that I use are a sign of multi-core use, and the Snapdragon of this phone runs an octa-core with 4 cores dedicated to low-performance tasks and 4 cores dedicated to things that require more speed. Those 4 high-power cores definitely proved to be used and to be more than enough for this game, which is very impressive. Given the results, it is obvious that this budget phone is too powerful for the sort of thing that I wanted to look at, so it's time to start turning the clock back. This is a Galaxy S5G 9006V from 2014 using a Snapdragon 801 and 2 gigs of RAM. From this point forward in the video, I will be using phones that have not received updates in a long time. So in order to install the game and the software needed, they're running nightlies from community ROMs of Android, which can always introduce unexpected performance issues. Keep that in mind. Curiously enough, the optimization of the game still shows, since we get something between 25 and 27 FPS on average, which is obviously a sharp decline from the previous test, but impressive for such an old phone and fairly playable for a mobile game. It is interesting how RAM scales with the general lack of memory, with only about 550 megabytes of used RAM while the game runs. Pretty good for a game of this magnitude and still manageable for a phone with 2 gigs, although it can start generating issues. CPU use hovers at around 150% as, again, the Snapdragon 801 is a quad-core CPU. albeit an old one, and it can somewhat keep up with this game. Things start getting really interesting when we get to the Galaxy S4 GT i9505, the same guy I used for my first video on this game, running yet an older Snapdragon and still 2GB of RAM. Here the game is hitting its limits, with regular dips under 20 FPS that are definitely noticeable while playing. Keep in mind I'm not using any apps here to modify the graphics, for that you have the video in the corner. RAM usage remains along the lines of what we saw before, and since CPU usage at this point is not giving us much information, I wondered if organizing it differently will reveal some interesting information, because I want to try another version of this game. You see, not content with the monumental task of creating a version of PUBG that accommodates better for mobile, with clearly amazing results, which were at the time a pretty unique move for a game of this size, Tencent surprised yet again by starting a test for an even more reduced version of the game, aimed at phones under 1GB of RAM, called PUBG Mobile Lite. Now, the thing is in development and it has not been released, and there's a beta of sorts running in some parts of Asia like the Philippines, which on itself is a very interesting move. I had to check this thing out, and getting it to work was complicated. It took some tools and APKs that I do not fully trust, and a VPN that completely destroyed my ping on this game. I highly encourage you to wait for the proper release of this game. But if that did not scare you, I will link down below the store and VPN app I use, but you do this at your own risk. From a gameplay perspective, it seems to be similar to the main game, with about 40 players instead of 100, a much smaller map, and graphics stuck on the lowest, with currently no obvious ways to tweak it any further. On the performance level, it jumps to an average closer to 25, or close to what PUBG Mobile was doing on the Galaxy S5. More interesting is how the use of resources change. While PUBG Mobile, on its worst moments, will edge around 600 MB of RAM use, PUBG Lite does not break 400. It is a very significant decrease. CPU use is also interesting. About 50% of the system resources are devoted to PUBG Mobile, while Lite sees about a 5 to 10% decrease in that front. I think the fact that the RAM difference is easier to measure and notice is not accidental. While, again, the app is still in development, I'm willing to bet that the target audience here is cheap, newer phones with better CPUs but low quantities of RAM. I have been digging into the files of PUBG Mobile Lite, but so far it does not seem like changes in the config files are read by the game. Hey, but it's still very early. I will continue looking, and I hope that once the game is out worldwide, more interesting discoveries will be made, just like it happened with regular PUBG Mobile. And no, this is not going to work, but just out of pure curiosity, I wanted to try this on a really old Galaxy S2 with an Exynos 4210 dual-core and just 1GB of RAM. The performance was all over the place, but every time I actually recorded a measure, it was mostly on single digits and bugging out the counter, but the mere fact it gets to this level is very impressive. So in conclusion, even if you do not use all the info in my videos on the topic, PUBG Mobile works extraordinarily well on modern cheap phones and pretty well on some older ones, and PUBG Mobile Lite, once it actually releases globally, might be a silent game changer for an entire sector of mobile gaming, especially with other games like Fortnite having such a terrible soft launch for weaker phones. And only with time I will be able to improve my understanding of how to get more accurate performance data on phones, which is probably going to be pretty useful if mobile gaming continues to evolve. And just how PUBG seems to be convinced that the expansion of gaming to developing countries is a priority for its future plans, with projects like PUBG Project Thai or the Philippines beta for PUBG Mobile Lite, we could all expand the gift of a better life with zero effort with Tab for a cause, a browser plugin that changes your default new tab page for a dashboard that raises money for charity through some non-intrusive ads, so you can help make the world better by just browsing the web. And you can select which charity the money goes to. Download it on the link down below, and thank you to them for sponsoring this video. And hey, if you watch all the way to the end or contribute in Patreon, I love you, but that will be our secret from everyone that did not watch to the end.